In what was arguably the most banger matchup of the entirety of the quarterfinal stage, and potentially extending to the entirety of the tournament here, Asian giants T1 and RNG squared off once again in the best in 5 environment. Despite the heavy support of the Chinese crowd, T1 actually curb-stomped RNG this series. I think although a lot of it does relate to how they piloted their compositions this series, I think T1 really held a masterclass in the draft stage. I love how teams like T1 continue to innovate and adapt to the needs of the drafting dynamics and groups, and especially their adaptations and what they feel like do well into their opponents specifically. In this review, we'll be specifically covering the way they piloted their draft in Game 3 of this series, as I think this was a dope case of both what they understand causes them the most problems against their opponents in the whole series, as well as how they selectively took the right risks in order to punish. As always, if you enjoy content like this, feel free to drop a sub to support the channel. Let's hop in the draft. In this game, we see RNG on blue side, and they ban on Caitlyn, Graves, and Camille, while T1 ban out Fiora, Lysandra, and Yuumi. T1 have been relatively consistent in the bans against RNG, believing in banning out the chaotic side laning picks and the Fiora, as well as the chaos as a pick like Lysandra brings to the table. RNG also have been playing around with their Graves priority in this series, and it has not been working, so they opt to ban it on blue this time around so that they don't have to deal with T1 potentially taking for themselves in the R1, R2. With the way the bans played out though, this does mean that the Aatrox has opened up for RNG to snag away as a very easy opener. However, we see a very spicy response come out from T1 as they actually swing for the immediate Yone counter, as well as look to support it off the bat with a Sejuani pick in the R1, R2. It's a pretty cool counter pick, but the one thing that this gives up for T1 is that their comp is pretty aware that it's playing forward. I also don't think that it would have been a high chance that they lose this pick in the second phase of bans, but I guess at this point they're not willing to take a risk in the bans, since if the Aatrox gets 2 extra bans shielded for it again in phase 2, it will be very hard to counter. It's also possible that they can leave this lane in isolation here, and Yone's identity can shift to just that of a side laner. For the B2B3, RNG have the Silas opened up here, so they take that away from themselves. Their options lead them to match a Kali into the Silas here as well. One thing specifically I like about the adaptations from this game for both teams is that they are both holding their AD carry pick for a much later slot than usual. I've mentioned in other videos that AD carry has some of the biggest variance in team compositions right now, and it actually has the biggest strengths in being able to capitalize on what the enemy team revealed in their composition. Whether it's a disgusting matchup in lane, or a champion that effectively checkmates the entire enemy team composition, it's good that both teams are giving this respect overall. Overall though, I'd say that both comps can still technically play whatever style they want, although both compositions definitely lean towards a forward style. It doesn't mean that they can't draft for getting leverage for their bottom lane though, especially considering what T1 have on the R5 here. They have a couple of options for how they want to play out this draft, either picking a generalist support and then speccing their AD, doing the vice versa of this, or even just all-inning on a combo that's still available depending on how the bans go. RNG technically have to reveal their entire bot lane matchup at once here, so the biggest variance here will depend on how T1 take advantage of this. I actually really like the bans for both sides here with respect to that, because T1 actually ban out a lot of the most blindable bottom lane champions and combos that strengthens the power of the B4, B5, while RNG attempt to ban things out for mobile AD carries, as they believe this is what T1 are actually going to go for. The R4 comes out, and we actually see Tahm Kench swing out from T1. T1 believe that this pick can be enabled in this slot here for the reason that Vi is the only consistent engage that RNG have at the moment. Notice as well that RNG banned out the 2 other best backwards/utility picks for mobile AD carries in this meta as well. So it's basically as if RNG is really telling them to take this now, or they can risk losing it in the B4, B5 too. While this gets them some leverage and securing safety for their AD carry, it mainly also reveals the nature of their bottom lane matchup, so it really gives a huge chance for RNG to capitalize with this pick. They handshake a chill lane in the bottom side with Aphelios and Soraka. While I love the Soraka pick in order to establish a strong matchup for RNG, I think the issue is that RNG's comp is now in a position where they also cannot play as aggressively as they normally can, and it's because T1 were willing to trade that matchup in the bottom side for a complete nullification of what Vi can do in this game. Varus rounds out the draft in the final pick here, and that pretty much locks in how these teams want to play. Again, some very spicy drafting coming in from those teams, as no one is afraid to pull up the stops right now in order to gain an advantage. However, because of that directional disadvantage, I'd say, from RNG side, and it's just kind of a little bit ambiguous as to how they want to play, I'd rate this draft 60-40 in favor of T1. As always though, I hope this analysis was insightful to you guys, and I'll catch you in the next one. Stay fresh.
Don't you think like that? I will love you endlessly.